friend, Jennie Gyford, who is a middle school math teacher extraordinaire and a phenomenal adjunct professor at National University teaching the math methods courses. Jennie, it is so wonderful to have you here live on YouTube with me.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be here. Thank you. Sorry, my thing's ticking at me. There we go.
I was like, oh, am I not doing something correct?
I was like, I'm sorry. I clicked on something and it started moving.
So we're here today to talk about math workshop. And I know you have a wonderful presentation that you're going to share with us.
I am.
Before we get started, just tell the audience, for those of the people that are out there, they're watching, why should we do math workshop? What is the value of having math workshop in the classroom?
Math workshop allows you to reach more students in a shorter period of time. And I am all about working harder, not, working smarter, not harder, to kind of get your best foot forward in the classroom. And I realized after many, many years, especially at middle school, I had 45 minutes to teach students. I had to come up with something to really help those kids who were my gifted in Excel, and then my friends who had some gaps in their learning that we needed to fill. And when you have a 7th grader come into your classroom and they're working at a 4th grade level, that takes some remodel of your curriculum to make it work for that kid. And I just put in the private chat the link to the Google Deck, and I'm also going to put in the chat the link to the presentation if you want to save it as a website. So the first link is to the actual Google Deck. Anybody can save it. And then that's the link to the website. So if you rather just bookmark it as a website, because it is a website, as I change things or as I modify things, it'll automatically modify live for you. So if I add anything additional down the road.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for giving us a little bit context of how Math Workshop works for you. I know myself, being a former elementary teacher, it was a godsend because my kids just couldn't sit still. And so up and moving and collaborating and sharing and, butts in the air while they roll their dice. And
right.
I was like, okay, this is happening. And, everybody's having fun.
Yes.
Fun. That's so key. And the kids are going to ask you once you try it. Obviously, it's not, it takes some orientation, but they're going to want it every single week. They're going to get excited for Math Workshop.
Exactly.
So let's get started. Let's share your presentation and
all right,
girl.
So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to cross our fingers this all works, technology at its finest. All right. Okay. Do you see the little window pop up yet?
Yep, I got it.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here. This is the website version of my deck. It's called The Power of Math Stations. A little bit about myself. As Patricia pointed out, I am a middle school math teacher, 7th and 8th grade math for Corona Norco Unified School District in Southern California. I also work for National University, where Patricia and I have worked together and collaborated on several courses. For National, I have worked in the Masters in IT program, teacher credentialing, the student teacher program where I was a university supervisor, and also a program teacher for the student teachers as well. And then just because I have extra time, apparently, I also work for Riverside County Office of Education as a secondary math coach for new teachers. So your first 2 years when you get hired on, you have to get a coach. And I'm one of those coaches for our COE. This is my email. Feel free to take down my email. I really accept anybody who wants to send me questions or comments or pick my brain, things like that. I get these emails all the time from presentations that I give throughout, United States and even international. I also have a Twitter handle. It's at Miss Gyford. All right, so my question to myself was, I got tired of being the teacher who taught right to the middle and didn't get a chance to really work with my students the way I wanted to. I felt bad for the kids who had so many gaps, and I just felt like everything I was trying to do at the time wasn't enough. And then I felt bad for my students who felt that this was so easy for them that they stopped trying. And they became very lazy. And needless to say, all of that can become very distracting to the classroom. And you can develop some really bad behavior problems in your classroom. And that caused me to be putting my attention more toward behavior and less toward curriculum. So in order to really meet my students' need, 45-minute class period, and I have 7 class periods. I have about 42 students in each class period. So I have quite a handful of kids, and they're teenagers. In my particular school is a one-to-one. We were one-to-one iPads, and now we're one-to-one Chromebooks. Or I think they're just laptops now, but they used to be Chromebooks. And that takes on a whole another level of behavior management. So the kids want to be on the devices. The kids like the technology. And so part of a teacher who's teaching technology to students is to teach that digital citizenship as well, where we are teaching them what is proper on the computer, what is allowed, and let them have their limitations and your expectations. Then once you get them on there and they feel comfortable and you start giving them stuff that is fun to do on the computer, those behavior problems became nothing. I barely had any problems with my students. And I'd probably say 99% I was perfect behavior in my classroom. In 20 years, I wasn't able to say that for all the time, because you always have the one wild class. I would hear of other teachers saying, "Oh, my kids are popping the keys off the keyboards and they're carving their names into the top." And I'm like, "Oh, no, not my kids," because my kids wanted to be on those. And well, then they also knew I'd probably come after them with a crazy teacher look or something. But they knew and respected what I was trying to do for them. And by doing that, I made their math fun. And when they saw the class as something fun, they didn't want to ruin that. So how did I do that? So one thing I would do, and when I help teachers out with this, is I always tell them you want to create lessons that are personal learning ability. So you want to say, okay, I have a student here who's not working at the highest level. How can I help them? Well, you find out what they are working at, let's say, they're 7th grader and they're working at a 5th grade level. All right. All of our California state standards for mathematics have this wonderful progression where what we learned in kindergarten is very important to what we do in 7th grade. Because if we couldn't do kindergarten math, there's no way we can ever do 7th grade math. And so I always tell my students, when you were in kindergarten, you probably thought that math was pretty hard then too. And the kids are like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but had you not learned that, could you imagine how hard it would be to do 7th or 8th grade math? And I said, math is something that builds on each other. It's a stair-step effect. So when you find out where they're at, you can kind of take that standard and see how it applied in 5th grade. What did they learn in 5th grade or what were they supposed to learn in 5th grade that would be equivalent to what they're learning now? And so I would design lessons at a 5th grade level, but at a state content level of 7th grade. And that just takes learning how to unpack standards and how to break them apart and really see what the essential learning is. A lot of times as teachers, we read those standards and we think, well, there's no way my kids can do that, or that's just too hard. If you break it apart, it's doable. And kids aren't going to learn the entire standard. They're going to learn the subsets of those standards, and they're going to learn the essential parts of those standards. And then I would always provide the students with their equal opportunity to grow and strengthen their academic abilities by allowing them to do redos, remakes, make mistakes. In fact, I didn't grade anything they did I considered practice, because in a sports analogy, I played sports for my whole life. I played sports all the way into college. I loved it. I was very competitive that way. But one thing sports taught me was you're going to fail and you're going to make mistakes. And there was days I couldn't hit the ball to save my life. And then there was days where I was hitting home runs, and it was great. But in practice, when the coach would call us to practice, that was the time to make the mistakes. That was the time to learn or try new things that you haven't learned before you get out on the game field. And we need to teach our classrooms the same way. We need to say, this is practice. It's okay. You mess it up, tear it up, throw it in the trash. Let's start over. It's learning from your mistakes that's key for these kids. And that's how you're going to close those gaps. So having those opportunities for that type of learning in your classroom is very important. The next thing is you also want to design lessons that are diverse, inclusive, and that are measurable. Measurable being, how do they measure up to the standard? Okay, you want to look at things in a diverse way. Think of other ways to show that math. Not every kid is a kid who's going to learn from a teacher who stands at a whiteboard all day and just direct teaches. Not saying that's a bad way. Okay, I teach like that too sometimes. And I taught like that for years. But one thing about doing math centers is it got me off the whiteboard and put me next to the kids, helping them in live instruction. And I was able to give them immediate feedback and give them the type of things that they needed right away. So now that I've kind of got you thinking, let's talk about the type of students we all have. Okay, we all have learners who are ELL. I have students in my class, not only just Spanish, but I have Mandarin, I have Japanese, I have, I forget the other names, but I have all different types of other languages in my class. And I also have special ed students. I have kids with learning goals, and they have various accommodations that need to be upheld. I have kids on 504s, such as ADD, ADHD. I even have students with ODD and refusal. You know, they're the kids who, they're not doing anything. So how do you reach those kids? And then if they don't have one of those parts identified to themselves, you have these other parts that many kids can identify under. Non-engaged, won't do's, distracted, absent, notorious absent students, kids on notorious independent studies because they always seem to take a vacation in the middle of your class. Kids with emotional needs, your low income kids, how are you going to help the kids at home with low income? And then you have kids with no home support. And unfortunately, all of these are very real. So how to achieve the ability to meet all these students every day and in 45 minutes is really what I had to wrap my head around and think about, what can I do? Well, I started reading books by Caitlin Tucker. I'm going to give a shout out to Caitlin Tucker. She has some amazing books on centers and math learning and all different types of centers. So even if you're an elementary teacher, how you can apply this to other courses as well. And at first I was very skeptical because as a secondary teacher, I guess I always thought of math centers as something you would do at the elementary level. And I'm like, okay, I teach secondary. This is not something I'm going to do. I'm like, how am I going to make up centers? This isn't for me. And I sat at a conference and I listened to a presentation where the presenter was talking about Caitlin Tucker and her books on math stations and the importance of math rotations. And I started to think, this kind of sounds easy to manage. I think I can do this. I might be able to work this out. And so once I started developing these math standards, I realized it literally saved me from my own insanity. I was working so hard, but not very smart. I was grading every paper they turned in to try and help get that grade. I didn't want it to be too heavy on assessments, and I didn't want it to be too easy of work, and I didn't want it to be this. And I was trying to differentiate, like, okay, this kid needs this and this kid needs that. Holy cow, it was crazy. So developing stations allowed me to look at data. And what I did was I created data-driven lessons. And with the use of technology, I was able to easily implement this into my classroom. Now, since my class was privileged to have one-to-one laptops, and I think almost now with the current situation of our, COVID situation, many schools now have those laptops. But before we had the nice laptops, and a lot of stuff really wasn't accessible on an iPad, So I literally ran around my school looking in all the storage units, asking teachers, hey, are you using that teacher laptop? Because you have a teacher laptop and a desktop. Are you using the laptop? And they're like, no. And I'm like, can I have it? And I would go around to the school and I stole every free laptop device I could for my kids. And then I had some that were donated, and I did all this just to make sure my kids had enough technology in the classroom. So it is doable. A lot of times if you reach out, you do like a fundraiser of some sort, or you call companies, a lot of them will donate at least 1 or 2 computers, and it's great. Hey, that's 1 or 2 you didn't have. But I noticed that by designing these lessons, at the same time, creating individual lessons for every student, I was able to meet their learning goals, each student's learning goals. I was able to challenge the high and help my friends who needed the help the most, more importantly. This is one of my favorite quotes. Technology will not replace a great teacher, but technology in the hands of a great teacher can be transformable. So we're not saying hand over a computer to your students and you're done, because it's what you're giving them to do on the computer that takes your prep. It takes your time. It takes your research to realize what you're doing is, and what you're providing that student is key. And it's going to be what helps them mostly. Technology is a supplemental material. It should never be your formal and only material. So let me tell you how I did all this. This is how when I sat down from the conference, I had a bunch of notes. I bought a couple of the Caitlin Tucker books, and I was like, okay, I can do this. Let me see. And I made these, groups in my head here. I was like, okay, I need to pre-assess. If I'm going to do data-driven lessons, I need to know where they are. And so a pre-assessment, I tried to make it as fun as possible. I would do things on Kahoot or Quizlet or quizzes, something that was fun and out of the ordinary. I didn't want them thinking they were taking another test. They knew it was called a pre-assessment. I also let them know this is not graded, but you will get a participation grade for this. But I would also tell them, hey, look, this tells me how much the math I need to teach you. So if you perform high, then I know you don't need me to teach every single component of this standard. You just maybe need to work on a couple components, or maybe I can challenge you to a higher level. And hey, friends, if you don't do very well on it, that's okay. This is something you've never been taught before. I just want to know, have you ever been exposed to it, or can you figure it out on your own? The kids started to really appreciate the pre-assessments. They thought it was, they were like, okay. It took a couple pre-assessments for them to realize, all right, I see where she's going with this. Then I knew I needed to place them in a group. Now, the key here as a teacher is to never let your students know what group they're in. All right. You don't ever want them to know, oh, I'm in the high group, or oh, I'm in the low group. And how you do that? Name them by color. I did at first. I did group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. And the kids naturally thought, oh, if you're in group 5, you're in the high group. Group 1's the low group. And then I was like, okay, all right, I see where they're going with this. So I started doing red, yellow, blue, maroon. And the next week I picked another color. The color is completely, non-essential. You don't need to have that. It was just something where I say, what group are you in? And they say, oh, I'm in this group. And in my brain, I go, okay, I know what you're working on. So what I would do is place the students in the groups homogeneously based on their pre-assessment data. So if they pre-assessed very high, maybe missed one question, they were placed into a challenge group where I was going to look at the learning progression of that math standard and say, I'm teaching 7th grade. Okay, how does that standard apply in 8th grade? And then the students would do the 8th grade version of that standard. So I can still give them a content standard grade, but they're doing it at a work difficulty of an 8th grade standard. And the kids thought that was the greatest thing. I actually had one of my highest students. She was phenomenal. Just one of those kids that got everything right. And one day she turned around, she was at her computer, and they also, by the way, can do this all collaboratively, and I'll get into that in a second, but she was working with her team, and she turned to me and she said, Miss Gyford, this is hard. And I said, good, you're learning then. And she goes, I'm going to figure it out, but man, this is really hard. And I was like, all right. And she figured it out. And she did some research. She Googled some stuff. I always tell my students, I'm not teaching stuff that you can Google. So when they ask me a question like, what's the area of a circle? I don't know. Google it. They need to learn those research skills. And so by putting them in these groups allowed them to really hone in on their research skills as well. Then I had my students who maybe perhaps we would call in our low group, the students who did not perform very well on the assessment. And I would work with them on filling in some gaps. And I would work with them on that learning progression. I would make sure that the level of difficulty wasn't too high for them, but that it was still touching the current state standards so I can give them a grade. And then the students who fell in the middle, well, you never really have a middle. You almost have like a middle low, a middle high, and then you're right in the middle kids. So I usually had 5 groups. 5 groups was my thing. And the reason I wanted 5 groups is because I also wanted my groups to be small in number. I would have anywhere between 5 to 6 kids per group. Some groups maybe 6, 7. Maybe I'd squeeze an extra kid in there. But you really want to make sure that you put them in homogeneously, but that you also make sure that those groups are small. So you're not dealing with large group rotations. And then once they were in groups, I would create lessons for that group color. So I'm going to create lessons for blue. I'm going to create lessons for green. I'm going to create lessons for red. And it sounds like a lot of work, but some of those lessons can actually be used in all the groups. Some of them can be used with just one group. Some of them can be used with just the other group. And so using technology allowed me to send out only what they needed to know. And we'll get into that as well. So this is a little diagram from Caitlin Tucker talking about all the different types of ways of engaging students online, helping with blended learning, seeing that blended learning in action, looking at self-assessments, and getting the kids to really understand how the day is going to go and the routine. The best part of this diagram here is right down here at the bottom. I like how she says we start with a warm-up, we have a review, there's some sort of connection, application, a preview, and an exit. And I was like, wow, I don't know if I can cover all that in one day, but I can cover that in centers. So I would have a warm-up. The warm-up is something I would teach. I would direct teach the warm-up. And the warm-up was a concept teaching. I would take the standard ed whole and say, all right, I'm going to teach you how to do this. I'm going to teach you the stuff you need to know. Here's some vocabulary. Here's some notes. I would supply them with their notes because let's be honest, middle schoolers do not know how to take notes in math. And if they do take good notes, they're going to take forever to write them down. So it was just a lot easier to provide them those notes and tell them if you want to add something, add it to the margin. But I would tell them that they needed to highlight certain things or go in and write comments, reflections, so that way they're interactive with the notes. The review would be a station. Connections was a station. Applications was a station. Preview was a station. And then the exit, we would come back. And those were my 5 stations: review, connection, application, preview. And then the exit was them coming back and showing me some form of mastery of that standard.
So let me just stop you there because I think that's beautiful. I want to see, let's say you're teaching a concept like equations and expressions, okay?
Yes.
How would that fit into that model that you just shared with us?
So I would teach the concept of equations and expressions first, go over the rules, go over how it's set up, and I would actually solve some of the problems. Mm-hmm. And that would also be in the provided notes I gave the students with step-by-step problem solving as well. But as we all know, you can look at notes and not really know what they're saying. It does need to be, verbally taught. And so there was a direct instruction part, and that was the preview. And then when they got to stations, the station itself would reiterate that several times. The other thing I would do is I recorded myself teaching. And the kids, if they forgot how to do it, needed more support, or at home they were working on something. I didn't give homework, but sometimes the kids wanted to finish at home. I would have these videos that I published up on YouTube. I got tons of videos on YouTube. And they could go back and revisit the whole instruction again. So it's that ability to reach them at different levels. And the students who didn't watch the videos ahead of time, they would be a little bit lost in class. And I was like, hey, that's okay. Why don't you go over to the table, put your headphones on, watch the video, and then jump in your group. My videos were never very long, right. So they could easily jump on and do that. So then once I knew where they were by their pre-assessment, by their, if they were getting all their work done, I would watch them how they went through the stations. And because I'm not on the board, I was able to walk around and help them individually. So once the stations are all set and then we do the exit at the end, that would be my way of seeing if the stations were effective.
Now, were they all doing the same exit tickets, or was there an exit ticket at each station?
The exit ticket was a quick assessment, usually online. I would use several programs, which I have in this Google Deck. At the end of the slides, you'll see all the resources that I use. And so, no, it was the same one to everybody. My friends who were working at a higher level, I might sneak in a couple extra questions that were harder. Harder, not in the sense of hard, but those were the type of questions they were working on in their centers. My friends who are working at a lower level, I would use the same assessment, but I would tweak the questions a little bit, maybe give hints and stuff. And I could do all this through the use of technology. So if you were sitting next to another student, the test is going to look identical. I mean, if they really wanted to cheat, they could, I guess. But, well, no, they couldn't because the answers were in different orders. But they could look at it and go, oh, okay, we got the same test. So they never felt like they were getting the low work or the high work or, oh, I didn't make it to the best group. Everything always looked the same. And that's because technology allows that. Nobody knew that I went in there and applied branching help hints for my friends that needed it. Nobody knew I went in and put in higher level thinking questions for those who needed it. So that's how I was able to really get that exit to be valid for everybody. But all in all, that exit ticket was just to see if they met mastery of the standard at hand. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for clarifying.
Of course, of course. So this is a little drawing here of kind of setting up stations. You want a teacher-led station. I was always a station. So every group came to me, and again, that allowed me to give that real-time feedback. I did away with homework just because I really wanted the validity of them doing it in classroom with me. Plus, kids work all day, 6 hours a day, just like we do. And the last thing we want to do is have them go home and work more. And I was a strong homework person at once, and I was like, they need to practice on their own. But by doing this setup, they are practicing on their own. And I was able to see them practicing. So I didn't need that extra practice at their own. Plus, I also, you run into cheating. Kids meet up with their friends out at lunch or during passing period, and hey, this is Miss Gyford's homework, write it down real quick. So we're giving A's to kids who maybe don't deserve them. And that's not a true assessment of how they're doing in the class. And I wanted a real assessment. So nothing went home in my class. In fact, they had to turn it into the turn-in bin, and my TAs would file it back into their file. Each of my students had a filing, like a little file folder in my classroom. And my TAs would just file it for me. And I wouldn't grade it. It was practice. They got participation points, but the kids felt at ease. A lot of teachers go, well, if they're not going to get a grade, they're not going to do it. Yes, but at the same time, they understand that the one thing I am really going to grade is their assessment. And that assessment's going to have to show me that they understand. Now, I would put in things such as projects were a grade or certain stations were grades because of the level of difficulty I was asking them to do. But their practice as far as the content and just learning it firsthand, it was just practice. So I also had some offline stations. I'm not fully tech. I would have PDFs or spiral reviews, collaborative group challenges. One of my favorite group challenges is by Robert Komplinsky. It's called Open Middle. Open Middle is really cool because you get these equations that have empty boxes in them. And the kids have to sit together. All of my groups, by the way, are collaborative, every single group. So when you walk into my classroom, it is not quiet. It is controlled chaos. The kids are all up out of their chairs. They're walking around. I have whiteboards all around my room. I actually call it a 360 room. And I learned that from a good friend named Ed Campos, who teaches in Central California. He had a 360 math classroom where he taught from the middle of the room and the kids were up on the whiteboards. With stations, it was great because the kids could jump up, they grabbed a marker, they wrote on the whiteboard right then and there. And if the other kid didn't agree, the kid would get up and go, no, this is how I would do it. And they loved it. And for the first time, I never had, to really go and show them how. They would figure it out. I had a kid, well, hold on, I'm going to Google it. And they'd pull up a YouTube video and watch how to do it. And then they get up and write it out. It was crazy. These kids were completely figuring it out for themselves and learning those skills. And it was great. And those were a lot of my offline. But Robert Komplinsky, Open Middle, great program, free sources online. Just Google Open Middle. You'll find some great stuff. But they would have these little empty boxes. It would say, use the numbers 1 through 9 only once and solve this equation. And so the kids could go, okay, let's put a 1 there. And then if I put a 4 there, and then I have to, that won't work. And then they have to start over. And it was so funny. They would sit there for about 5 minutes. And I'd always, every time, every day, a kid at that group would look at me and go, I don't get this. I'm like, yeah, you do. Try it. Work with your friends. And I was like, I'd get out little pieces of paper with numbers on them, and I'd have them move it around, or they'd jump up on the whiteboard. And then once they figured it out, they were like, yeah. Now, this is like the biggest war group I had. And everybody got so excited to go to that center every day. They were like, oh, are we in that center? And I'm like, yeah, because they want to try and figure it out. Now, each day, each group had a different worksheet. So that way they couldn't just cheat off the group from before, because again, I'm applying it to their homogeneous data level. And that allowed me to give them different things, but it looked the same. Nobody knew they got something different. It all looked the same. And then I had, of course, my online stations. I had some self-paced, personalized practice that I would use through different forms of online programs. Creation tool, I'd have them doing Desmos, creating cool stuff on Desmos using their applications. And then I had online journaling or online notebooking, all kinds of stuff just to get them to think about the math. So again, I would start with 5 centers, and then you can see here how I applied the groups. I would say group 1, or I actually wouldn't even see group 1 anymore. I just said group red, group yellow, group green, whichever. And then this is kind of like to let you know what my classroom really looked like, sounded like, and felt like for the students. And the best part about this was the green part. I loved it, that there was math talk. In 20 years of teaching, I've never heard students jump up and debate math. They were like, and they were doing it respectfully. They're, no, when you do this, you have to cancel that. Or when you do this, that gets rid of that. And I'm like, and I would sit back and I'm like, they're listening. They're listening. They got this. And then again, because I recorded myself teaching, sure enough, if the debate got too strong, somebody would pull it up off my YouTube video and go, watch Miss Gyford teach this. And it's funny when you're in the classroom and you're helping students and then you hear your own voice from across the room. It's like, what's going on? But the kids are working. They're doing it. They're engaged. I would have kids come into my classroom like, this is the best class in the whole day. I look so forward. And I'm like, math? Are you kidding me? Because a lot of times math really is like selling beachfront people in Idaho. It just is not everybody. And a lot of times kids come in with a mindset, I'm going to hate this class. Already, I'm going to hate this class. But you write down, this was my lesson plan book in the sense. I didn't really have the teacher book that everybody goes and buys. Mine was columns. What are going to be my teacher-led stations? What's going to be my online stations? What's going to be my offline stations for each color group? And again, some of these can be used in both groups or several groups, and that's okay. Not have to have 5 or 25 different, assignments. No, a lot of them did coexist, especially the fun ones, the kids, just for fun. So we would talk about small, I would put my kids into small groups. We'd have technology. They apply, they create, they would get hands-on. They'd have manipulatives, really try to touch all the sensory aspects of learning. And again, here's my teacher warm-up. This is where I would give the pre-assessment. I would teach them the current standards as a whole group. And the teachers would learn I would teach them the vocabulary. I'd front load those basic skills, and I'd provide notes to complete those upcoming stations. Then I would create the groups for all learners based on how many problems they missed. So I would make the pre-assessment. My pre-assessment was how I broke down the standard. So when I took the standard, I'd break it down, and the more challenging question, I would give a couple questions on the quiz about that. So the kids who actually got that one right probably know what they're doing. And then I would give some of the very basics that belong to that standard. And then, of course, a lot of them in between. So let's say a student missed problem 1 and 7. And I would look at my answer sheet and I'm like, okay, if they missed 1 and 7, they're missing these 2 substandards. Or maybe it was the same substandard twice. And then I would group them with other students who also missed those same 2 substandards. So I'm not teaching every single substandard to every single kid. I'm only teaching the parts that they missed, and then I'm embedding spiral review of the other standards for them within the state. For my special ed students, of course, we always look at data first with special ed students. We're looking at spiraling the current work with their level standards. So I would find out what that level is in 5th grade. I'd embed it. I'd spiral it up. So I'm trying to find their gap and then help them to be able to master it at a 7th grade level. Modify those learning goals, grading on progress instead of grading on how many they got correct or how many they got wrong. So I would look and say, okay, that first practice assignment, you only got 1 right, and that's okay. Hey, it's 1. On this next one, let's try for 3 right. Can you try for 3 at the next station? And the kid, they would challenge, and I'm like, hey, I just want 3 right. And they would get so excited if they actually got more than 3 right. They would say, oh, I got 5 right. Hey! Give them a grade based on their progress, how they're progressing through the standard, because they are operating at a standard that's lower than the current standard. And you need to take that into consideration and just grade on how well they're progressing through those standards. Support resources, of course, having that stuff online, like my teaching videos, having those hands-on manipulatives definitely does help as well. And assignment completion requirements need to be different. So if you are working with students with special needs, or even students with behavioral disabilities, take into consideration it takes them so much longer to complete an assignment than other students. And that's okay. We're not looking at work completion. We're looking at what they are exposed to and how well we are teaching what they're exposed to. If they do 2 assignments and the other groups are doing 6, that's okay, but make those 2 assignments worth it. Make it worth their time. Does not mean make it harder. Make it have a stronger impact. Really make sure they understand those 2 assignments very well. You also have your ELL students. Now, I know I can help out some of my students with Spanish, but when it starts to getting into other languages, I'm not good at that at all. So using one-click translate is really great. And this is a shout out to my friend, Amanda Sandoval, who also trains on helping her ELL students. And this is, she gave me links to notes on how to use the translating tool. So if you click on that little talking bubble there, it'll take you to the notes form of how to integrate one click into your classroom. And then other ways to help assess special ed students and ELL students, and also any of your other kids, to be honest. You can do things such as podcasts, Flipgrid, Screencastify, a whole bunch of stuff that we can have kids verbally tell us how they're doing. A lot of kids, it's just writing it on paper is just so hard. But if they were on a flip grid, they could walk us through it. Boom, that's mastery. They got it. Just because it's not in the traditional sense doesn't mean they don't understand it. So finding the way that works best for the student, not finding the way it works best for us. And that takes on a little challenge and a little mindset from the teacher as well. So here's a glimpse of my actual classroom. This is station 1. Station 1 was with me. So you'll see that the kids they're all grouped together. I put their desks really close to each other. I would walk around and give them real-time feedback, and then I'd walk away for a minute. And I'd say, hey, do this next problem. I'd walk away, check my other groups, answer any questions, circle back to them. I would also have expo markers because this particular group, because they were working a lot on practice, they didn't always want to get up and write on the whiteboards that I had in the room. So they would just write on the desks and expo markers, which, by the way, comes off perfectly clean. A lot of desks. I mean, if you have a different kind of varnish or finish on your desk, you might want to check it first. But these particular desks were very glossy. The kids could write on them, erase. It was great. Again, no larger than 6 people in a group to really help them. And this allowed me to also help them on their personal area that they needed the most help with. So if I was taking something at a 5th grade level and applying it at a 7th grade standard, this was the time I got to kind of fill in those gaps. I'd have collaborative stations. As you can see here behind my students, you can see the whiteboards. The kids would be up, they're talking, they're walking around. They'd work together, then they share the results. All kinds of great ways to support the students in their individual learning goal as well. Collaboration was key. The kids finally learned how to speak to each other. And every once in a while I'd catch, side conversations, but that's okay. Side conversations are okay as long as it doesn't continue on for too long. Because I always think of myself in a staff meeting. There comes a point when your brain just kind of needs a tune outfit and you really got a person next to you something. It's going to happen. It's human nature. So let them have those moments. It's okay. If it carried on, I would just walk over and, tap on their desk like, hey, so how's that math coming? And they're like, oh, sorry, Miss Gyford. I was like, that's okay. I get it. Well, as long as you come back, you just got to come back. Couple of the stations, the kids would wear one earbud, listen to the music they liked, especially if it was more of an independent activity. They still had their buddies that they could ask questions to, but if it was independent activity, then they like to listen to their music. I also work hard with a lot of PBL, project-based learning activities. Try to get kids to really up their game and work at those higher level DOK levels. These were geared more toward DOK 3 and 4 levels. The best way to make these is, to be honest, a lot of them I kind of stole off the internet. And I didn't make all these. There's so many great resources out there. And Patricia, I know you probably have a ton on your site where they're already made. And so you push them through on a Google Doc and you're done. So
they do this in the class in week 4 of the assignment. They have to create their own project-based activity.
Right.
I asked you about the collaborative activities that you just finished.
Yeah.
Are those like problem-based tasks like the Robert Kaplinski?
Yeah.
I used to do things like even just going to get the circulars at the grocery store and having them calculate the cost of an item.
Yeah.
% off, things like that.
Yes.
You're crafting different problem-based activities and they're working collaboratively to problem solve.
Right. A lot of them were those open-ended type question projects where I would say, hey, here's what you get. Now solve it. And kids hate those. They hate them because they want so bad for you just to give them the answer. And you look at them like, I'm not giving you just the answer, my friend. You got to figure it out. Here's your budget. Let's say we're talking about, percentages or finance. Here's your budget. Now I need you to buy this, this, and this from certain stores. Get on the computer, find me the price. Mm-hmm. And the kids would sit there and debate. Yeah, that one's prettier, but we don't have the budget for that one. And it was great. And they had to give me like a whole portfolio presentation at the end of why they chose the certain items they chose and things like that. I also do some breakout EDU, giving a shout out to that company. I started creating my own breakouts where the kids had to answer certain questions to unlock the lock at the bottom. They would get a code. And again, the kids all, some groups would be like, hey, write down their code so we can just put in the code next time. They didn't realize that they got a different project when they got to their station. Again, because of technology, it looks the same, but it's different. And so that allowed, again, that differentiation, but it also kept them from cheating off
each other. Ahead of them. Those middle schoolers, they're all about
yes. Yes, they sit there and they're like, write that down. I'm like, it's not going to help you. And then the kids realize, oh, you changed it? Yeah, I changed it. I wanted you all to have something new and something different. So you're not cheating off each other. But again, some of the things we could, and every once in a while, I would use the same breakout EDU with all my groups. But they got so keened on not writing it down that they didn't even try. So it was pretty funny. I was like, there you go. So you also have your collaborative technology. This is where I mentioned my EDUs here. This is also where I do self-assessments. Mm-hmm. They have to figure out what they're doing wrong. Mm-hmm. And they would sit there and go, the answer's not there. Oh, what the heck? We're doing it wrong. Okay, look back at our work. Oh, dude, we were supposed to multiply and you added. Oh my gosh. And the conversations would start up. And then once they flipped the answer and they got the little ding and they got the code, they knew they broke out. They would be all excited. Do I grade these? No. If they broke out, they get the full participation points. They're good. It's practice. But it's the best practice because they're self-assessing. So if you can make their learning a game, bringing gamification into your classroom and making something fun, again, they don't even know they're learning math. They think this is video games all day long. This is like up their alley. And I would give hints. I'd provide, and I even tell them, you're on a computer. Open a tab and Google it, my friend. And then I always have teachers go, what if they use photo math? Then they use photo math.
Right.
But at the end of the day, they can't on the test. And then I'm going to know. And the kids don't want to disappoint. And that's when I pull them aside privately and go, hey, my friend, you're getting like perfect scores on all your practice, but then you died on game day. What happened? I always called assessment day game day because it didn't freak them out so much when I'm like, you have a test the next day. I'm like, hey, game day tomorrow, bring your game. And I would talk to them. They're like, yeah, Ms. Gyford, I kind of used photo math. Or I'm like, okay, all right. Well, did that help you? No. Okay. Well, I just wanted to point that out to you. Do you want to redo this quiz? Yes. All right. Let's do that. And I would sit down and work the problems that they got wrong out with them and stuff. But that, again, it just takes time on the teacher part as well. Mm-hmm. Technology review stations are always great. A lot of these, sometimes they would work on their own, but they had their buddies to, hey, what'd you get for 14? Because they're all working on the same assignment. What'd you get for 14? The kid would say, I got A. Well, how'd you get A? Because I would always ask them, don't just tell a friend an answer. You teach it. Because when you teach it, you know it. Anyway, so then we talk about our exit, our after rotations. What are we going to do? So before we do game day, before we prep for game day, we do some catch-up work because 45 minutes is maybe not enough for every group to finish their rotations. Mm-hmm. So the kids would go back and finish the rotations they needed to finish. I was, of course, walking around helping any groups that still needed help because I wasn't secured to a station as much anymore on this day. The kids who were all caught up, they would get the study guide. They can work with a peer on it. They could highlight and annotate notes for their assessment. They got to use their notes, even the ones I provided for them. They could redo any of the practice sheets if they felt like now they got it. They didn't get it when they first looked at it, but now they think they understand it. Hey, take it off, erase it. Again, I don't grade them until the very, very end. So the kids always go, can I have that back? I'm like, it's in your file. I haven't even looked at it. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah, go fix it. And then for one thing I would always give my students who are working maybe at a little bit of a higher level is an error analysis kind of assessment where they had to find out what that person was doing wrong in that equation and then fix it for them and then tell me in words what you would have told that friend if they had done that. What would you have said to them? So that takes about a day. So this is all the rotations. The rotations was 1 center per class period. So it would take us about 5 days because there's 5 rotations for each group to go through each of the rotations. And then on the 6th day would be catch-up day or study guide or getting prepped for game day. And then we'd have the game day assessment.
So where workshop, every day, starting with teacher warm-up, the teacher review, some direct instruction. Then they go to 1 center a day.
Yes.
So maybe
and for 45 minutes, they would work with their group on that 1 center, drop their stuff in the bucket as they walked out the door. My TAs would file it. The next day, my TA distribute all their stuff back out to them. But they would be at a new station now. But if they finished early, they can go back and finish something from another group too. It always allowed for them to continue working, even if they had finished that particular station early, because some of them are faster than others.
Right. And are you using like any type of blended learning tools like Khan Academy or iReady or?
I would. I had Khan Academy in a couple of the stations where they had to watch Khan Academy. And then, actually what I would do was a screen record of Khan Academy. And then I would purposely stop it at a point and go, now what? So they couldn't watch the rest, nor did they know which Khan Academy it was. So it wasn't like they opened up Khan Academy. I did a screen record. I would use Edpuzzle a lot, where I could get them to fill in answers as they went. Pear Deck was another one that I used often. So many more. And I even had a Flipgrid station, which was funny because the kids would go out in the hallway and record themselves, record each other, talking about how they teach the math. And then I would always tell them, like, you can mock me. And of course, they took me up on it. And I'm like, I don't talk like that. And they're like, yeah, you do. But the kids had fun making fun of me, and that was all good. It was all in fun. But those are all your informal assessments. And those particular assessments would be something I would count as a grade, is when they're physically turning in answers to questions or doing flip grids. That requires a little bit more work. It's not as gamified. So I would give points to those certain ones. But I wasn't grading every single paper, every single day, and homework, and warm-ups, and exit tickets. Oh my gosh. I actually did the math one day and said, all right, I have 250 students. If they all complete a warm-up, a class assignment, and a homework, that's 250 times 3 assignments. And then, on top of that, I have redos. And on top of that, oh my gosh, I calculated out that I was close to 3,000 papers a week.
Wow. I
was grading. And I'm like, for what? I'm giving myself more work. And the kids aren't doing any better.
Right.
I saw better scores with less pressure on them, less pressure to be successful. They were giving me their best work. And I think because it took the anxiety down. And they realized if I mess up, it's okay. It's practice. I can try again. Even if I mess up on game day, I'm going to be kind of embarrassed. I'm going to be kind of hurt. But you know what? It's not the end of the world. Teacher's going to allow me to redo it.
Now, what about all those teachers out there that maybe they're being told they have to do their Go Math program with Fidelity and they need to do explicit direct instruction all day? How do you fit those pieces in?
Well, I would say if you're being told to give direct instruction all day, you might want to become the rebel because that is just bad teaching. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for the teacher. It makes for a very long day. It's not good for the kids because they're not interacting with it. Mm-hmm. If we're preparing these kids for a future of high technology, high collaboration type fields, we need to be teaching them that now in schools. So you can still take your own curriculum and break it down into centers and break it into fun. Put it into slide decks or put it into breakout type formats and push it through the same way. I even used my curriculum with the integration of some of the tech websites I'm going to show you guys here at the bottom, where I was able to go in and put my own questions in. but it was now on the computer, and I could now make it a little bit more personalized than the kids would have as just a worksheet in the classroom. But if you have to use a certain curriculum, by all means, you can. And actually, if you look at a lot of curriculum guided books, the teacher edition, you'll see them. They already broke down the standard for you. There's your standards. There's your standards right there. Okay, this standard is talking about this. Okay, I'm going to put that down as my center 1. This is center 2. This is center 3. It's just how you decide to up your game a little bit and how you try to really engage those kids. And it does take work. And like good teaching is taking a little bit more work and a little bit more, being a little bit more conscious of how it's going to be perceived by the students. And that was my hardest part to come up with, is I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to take me forever. But to be honest, once I got into the groove, it was easy. It was easy. The laying it out, getting it out there, uploading it, sending it out through Google Classroom is what the platform I used. If you use Canvas or if you use Blackboard or use Moodle, you can do it all the same. Push it out to the kids. This is what we're doing. This is your station. So it's already there. And just have that. If you front load all your prep at once,
right,
the rest of your week is just helping kids. And it's great. It's knowing that it got me off the whiteboard. It got me off of, all right, what am I doing today? What am I doing tomorrow? It's already on there. And then I always have kids go, can I go on to the next rotation? No, because you have to work with your team. So if you do it ahead of time, you're going to be sitting there at that station now doing nothing. And that's not okay. And you have those overachievers who would. If it became a real problem, I would just hide it from that one student, and make them wait. But I really never had to do that. So I was pretty lucky because they wanted to work with their friends the next day.
Right. Yeah, that's what middle school is all about.
Oh, yeah. It's collaboration and being socialized, right?
Exactly.
So, and then at this point, I would reevaluate my data. I wanted to see, did they grow? I'm looking for growth from their pre-assessment to their assessment. And a lot of times that exit ticket was their pre-assessment again, just with some different numbers, or maybe worded just a little bit differently, but it made it very linear where I could see from start to finish how they progressed with the stations. If I didn't see much growth on a lot of students, then I know my centers weren't very effective. They had fun doing them, but they probably weren't the best effective centers. And then the next time I sat down to make centers, I would take that into hand. And try to, find something that would really help them do better. And then if I saw really good growth, then I'm like, all right, I met target. I met learning. And that's a great feeling as a teacher as well.
Let's chat just a second about using that data to share with your students, right? So
yeah,
you're taking that pre-assessment.
Yeah.
And looking at the centers, and there's that post-assessment. Where are you tying in some, like, having students look at their own data and reflect on that and set new goals and such?
That's a great question. Yes, I do have them keep an online journal. And they keep it in the Google Classroom. So it's not a physical book in the classroom. It's all online. I would tell them that they scored at proficient, let's say. Well, I don't use proficients as much. I use far above mastery, slightly above mastery, all those kind of terms. I even have a stamp that I don't put A, B, C, or D on their papers because I grade by standards-based grading, which is a whole different workshop. But I would put a stamp on their papers that would say at mastery, or emerging mastery, or far above mastery. Or it would be some sort of nice. The kids didn't get, oh, I have an A. No, honey, you're far above mastery, which is great. That means mastery is a C. So if you want to put a letter to it, right? But they didn't see these letters all the time. They would just see where they fell. And so I would have them write where they are, where they hope to be at the exit ticket or on game day. And then they had to start a bar graph. And so their pre-assessment, they do a bar graph. And then because I did grade a few of the assignments from the centers, such as the breakouts or the flip grids, things like that, and I would grade on the content they're telling me, not because they're cute on the video or they made me laugh, which did make it harder to grade sometimes because you're like, oh, I loved your video, but you didn't speak anything about the math.
Right.
You really have to have a rubric, and I gave them a rubric. I told them what I'm looking for. And I would grade by the rubric, which really allows for that standards-based grading to be applied. And they would get a score on that. So they could see a couple centers that they did get a score on, they would match that with their bar graph. So if their pre-assessment graph was up to like out of 10, they were at a 5. But then their flip grid, they got a 3 out of 10. Oh, what happened? You seem to really understand the content at pre-assessment. Why aren't you able to explain it now? Okay, go back in. Let's look at your video together. And this was that teacher-led station where I could sit down with them and look at their video and go, okay, you know what would be really good here if you mentioned this, this, and this. Like, do you remember that? And the kids were like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about saying that. There you go. Let's redo the video. And so I told kids, don't ever do anything in pen or marker or crayon because there's going to be lots of erasing, and that's called learning. Erasers are great things. And then they started to get those stamps that would say at mastery, at mastery. And if it said below mastery, I would say below mastery, come see me was my stamp. And then once they saw me, we went over it, we reviewed it. I put a big red X through below mastery, and I'd put their current level. I'd be like, now you're at mastery. And the kid's like, yeah. But if I say, oh, you got an F, just your typical mindset just shuts down. I mean, even as an adult, if I take a college course and I get an F on something, I'm like, oh, Lordy.
That's when those statements come in like, well, I'm just not a math person, or my brain just doesn't learn language.
Yeah.
I taught Spanish 4 times, and then I taught in South LA and became a fluent Spanish speaker where people were asking me where I was from. It's like,
that's
wow.
awesome.
It's just amazing, just having the right mindset, right? The mindset.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it's all about. And when you give that mindset to kids, don't teach it to them, give it to them.
Exactly.
Make your class welcoming. Make your class fun. Are you going to have boring days? Of course you are. There's going to be days where you're like, look, friends, today's a worksheet day. Don't ask. And they kind of go, okay. And that's just how it's going to be, sub days. But here's the best part. My subs didn't teach anything. They didn't have to teach. I didn't have to worry about them telling my kids the math wrong, because that's usually what I get are people who've never taught math, come in and sub math, and then teach math the wrong way. And I'm like, no. And then I had to fix all that. The kids had me on video. If they needed to revisit that to understand one of the stations, that's good. I just told my sub, walk around, monitor. If they don't know, have them get up and ask another group. Hey, dude, do you know the answer to this question? Get up and walk around. Expand your group. It's okay to walk outside your group to go get help from someone else, as long as you're not keeping them from getting their work done. But in the sense of a sub day, yeah. So my subs would always say, this is the best class ever. The kids are totally come in. They look on the whiteboard. They see what group to report to. They sit down. They got right to work. I didn't have to collect anything. I'm like, yeah, make it easy for them. So
that's
always rest assured I could call in sick and I didn't have to sit there and go, oh goodness, what am I teaching today? Because everything was already pushed through Google Classroom. Even my assessments were, which is my next 2 slides are all the programs I use. Some of them are free, some of them are not. If I used it religiously, I would go ahead and pay for the subscription. Some of them I could get away with just the free versions, but my biggest ones were assessments, Desmos, Equatio. I would do those. Virtual Nerd was another great teaching video series. So I liked Virtual Nerd versus Khan Academy, just because it's a little bit more in the classroom type. MIT was one I would use with my higher students. They have free lesson plans for middle school to high school students in mathematics, broken down by content area. And you can just steal one of the lessons. You can use it as is. You can tweak it, make it more relevant to your coursework that you're doing, especially if you have to stick with a certain coursework. Formative is where I really used a lot of my assessments, where I could actually make my own questions. and that was great. And then some other ones I use, here's Robert Komplinski. Some of my background is working with Ditch That textbook, which is a whole series in itself, PBL Works, all kinds of fun stuff. And it's been great having all these different resources. Whiteboard Fee allows for online whiteboards where the kids, you'll get all the little tiles going across your screen like a Zoom meeting, and you can see everybody's whiteboard, and see how they're participating. Kami is great for math teachers, by the way. It does require you to pay the subscription to get the Kami that has the math embedded formulas and symbols. But they could take a PDF, they could write over the top of it, and boom, you just took a PDF and you upped your game. And I would have them on certain of them, I don't want the answer. I want you to click video, and I want you to record or voice record how you would solve that problem. And so as I'm looking at their PDF, I just made it a DOK 2 or maybe even 3 by asking them to teach the PDF. I don't want the answers. I want you to teach it to me. How would you, if you were the teacher, how would you make your own teaching video?
Love it. Then you don't have to worry about photo math, right?
Exactly. So I didn't have to worry. Yeah, they stopped real quick with trying to cheat their way through things. But you got to know your middle school students, and I have worked in high income level schools. I've worked in low income schools. I'm going to be honest, a lot of your Title I schools have the money for all this technology. And if not, it's beg, borrow, maybe steal it from the storage room if you have to. But it's very possible to have this type of learning environment in your classroom.
Awesome. I love it. Math Centers. It's amazing. And you're teaching and you have a smile on your face and you still love middle schoolers. So I don't know what that's as much proof as I need.
It's been fun, and it's something that I wish we could see in different types of learning environments out there. And I've realized very quickly that not every kid learns the same way. We are not a one-size-fits-all group. Absolutely. And when we teach one-size-fits-all, you're going to get a one-size-all answer, and that's going to be mediocre. And I wanted to strive for better. I wanted to see my students at their best. And I got tired of teaching right to the middle. And that's what I was teaching. And I realized I'm doing all the work. I'm doing everything. And kids, you always have teachers come up and go, I feel like I have to spoon feed these kids. Why? Why are you spoon feeding them? Why are you spoon feeding? Make them figure it out. They love to. It's a puzzle. Life is a puzzle, and you got to figure it out. And I tell my students all the time, I'm not going to come home with you and help you. When you have to figure something out, you're going to have to Google it, and you're going to have to know what research is good and what research is bad, and which YouTube video really applies to what you're trying to learn. And then if at the end of the day, I always go, did you watch my video? And they're like, no. Let's start there, and then come see me. So. Yeah.
I got to check out your videos. You're going to have to share a link to your channel if it's public so we can.
Oh, it is very public. I probably have over 3,000 teaching videos from 6th grade to 9th grade on there.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I've been making my own videos for 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, you just go on YouTube, type in Jennie Gyford, and it pops up.
And I will, and I'll follow your channel too. I love math videos. Those, but you got to get a good math teacher that you can understand.
Yes. I just hate listening to myself because I swear I sound like I'm 2 years old. So I'm like I am older than this.
Well, you look great, and you've been in middle school for 20 years. I mean, that's amazing. You haven't, that.
Well, middle school I've been at for 13. High school I was at high school for about five years, and then the rest was elementary.
Wow.
And then now college with you, so university.
I love it. I know, and it's great to have you on our first ever live YouTube event.
I know, this is great, and it's working. We haven't run into technical issues yet.
No. We'll have to do a video on Restream soon because this is such a cool tool.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. And don't forget to check out the comments. I'm going to share a link in the comments to Jennie's YouTube channel and her wonderful presentation she shared with us today. So, Jennie, thank you so much for taking this time.
Of course. Yes. Thank you guys for joining us and spending time learning about math centers, because that's everybody's thing to learn about on a Sunday. So that's great that you joined us. I love it.
It was always my planning day. So I'm like,
it is. You know what it is? It is. It's that mindset, again, of getting ready for the next day and, you know, walking in and being a little bit more humble about what you're teaching that day. So
absolutely. Well, thanks, Jennie.
Of course.